Okay, welcome back to the Mental Toughness Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Siebold, and today I want to talk about critical thinking. This is one of the most overlooked skills in business and in sports, and I think maybe even in life, if you want to take it that far. Human beings are emotional creatures. Just to make this really simple, right? We prefer to say, well, we're very logical, but the truth is, no matter how analytical you are, you're more of an emotional creature than a logical creature. We love to say logic because we think, well, emotion is flighty. Emotion turns us into dumber people. The higher emotion gets, typically, the dumber we get. That's been proven over time. So we like to say, well, I'm a very logical person, but we are by sort of definition, human beings are emotion-based creatures. So we have to sort of push our emotions aside sometimes, take them out of the equation to make better decisions. Because critical thinking, at the end of the day, there's lots of definitions. It's really making decisions at a higher level based on greater criteria. And these decisions are devoid of emotion. It's really emotionless thinking, emotionless decision-making. I mean, they have courses in colleges and universities right now that take a year to teach critical thinking. I've taught it to some of the biggest companies in the world, executive teams of the biggest companies in the world, and I make it really simple because when you do that, you need to make it simple. Not because they can't understand it, because they don't want to spend a year learning it. And so there's some definitions. There's some definitions and some examples of this. I don't know if you saw the Academy Awards, but you probably heard about it if you didn't, where Will Smith heard Chris Rock tell a joke on his wife, and he's in the front row, and he goes up and slaps him in the face. Okay. I thought if you saw it you've probably seen it on video by now if you haven't, but if you didn't see it live, you probably saw it on YouTube somewhere. It's all over the place, right? Why would this happen? Why would Will Smith completely turn off his critical thinking skills? And I think he's probably a pretty smart guy. I've always been a fan. I think a lot of us are fans. He's a big movie star. And why would he turn off his critical thinking skills and assault someone in front of 1 billion people? That's the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen in my life. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. Certainly the dumbest thing I've ever seen an actor do, or any kind of performer or a famous person. And they've done some dumb things. That's the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen. Everybody thought it was a bit. It was a gag. Well, it wasn't. He slapped him in the face. And Chris Rock is not the biggest guy in the world either. And Will Smith's a pretty big dude, so that's a whole nother thing in itself. But why would he do something like that? That's when emotion takes over someone's thinking. He's basically drunk with emotion. And if you don't believe he really meant it, or you think it was some gag, check out the full video where he goes back to his seat and Chris Rock is like, what just happened? And Will Smith screams out at him a couple of expletives I won't repeat on the show. Okay, you can watch it on YouTube, but he was very, very angry, very emotional. Okay, this is disastrous thinking. This could wreck this guy's career. It probably won't, but I think it's going to leave a big dent in his career. I think it's going to be a giant stain. He ruined the next few, winners of the Academy Awards. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor. And of course, no one was thinking about that. All they were thinking about was this guy just assaulted a guy on stage in front of 1 billion people. How stupid can you be? And so that's what happens when critical thinking leaves someone's mind and emotion takes over. Think of emotional thinking this way. It's like if you've ever had way too much to drink, it's the same thing. Alcohol and drugs do the same thing to a brain that emotion does, high emotion does. It makes you dumber. It gets you caught up in this level of thinking that is so far below what your normal thinking is that you do dumb things. That's why you ever get really drunk, you wake up and go, what did I say? Why would I ever say that to someone? Why would I ever do what I just did? Because you were stupid, because you were so drunk with alcohol that you weren't thinking straight. But the same, it happens the same way with emotion, where you're drunk with emotion, and anger is one of the worst ones. And that's what happened to Will Smith. He was laughing at the joke. Then he looked at his wife, and she was not, and the joke was on her, and she was not laughing. And then he goes up and smacks this guy, Chris Rock, one of the most famous comedians in the world. That's how dumb people can be when they're not using their critical thinking skills. So There's a lot of other things that are going on, like what's going on in U.S. politics now. Now, this doesn't mean, this is not about politics, whether you're left, right, or center, or, wherever you are politically. It's just with the overturning of the election. Okay. Now, it's fair to say, well, an election, should be checked out and everything because, maybe there were some irregularities in the election, or maybe there was some problem. So it goes to court and it gets checked out. Well, that's what Trump and Trump's followers did, right? Well, it was shut down in every single court case they ever went. They laughed him out of court. It was completely made up. I've known Donald Trump since 1996. That's when I first met him. He was a client of ours for 15 years. He's the biggest liar I've ever met in my life. This is not political. I'm not saying anything. I voted for Trump the first time. Okay, so if you're saying, well, I'm anti-Trump, I know Trump. I've been to Trump's house. I've had dinner with Trump. I've had lunch with Trump. I've had breakfast with Trump. Okay, I've worked with Trump. He was a client for 15 years. I never liked him. No one likes him. I don't know a single person in the world that likes him, including his wife. Another story. But or any of his wives, for that matter. Another story again. But the point of it is that he checked it out, but I knew what he was doing. He just makes stuff up. That's what he does. And to his, I don't want to say to his credit, but somehow this guy gets people to believe his complete lies. And this is not the first one. It's just the biggest one. I watched him doing business for years. And I could tell you stories. You'd believe him now because you know who he is. But even if you're a fan. But people believe these things. Even after 100 court cases say there were no major irregularities in the election, you still got a major percentage. You might be one of these people that actually believe the election was stolen from Donald Trump. It's a fantasy. It's just delusional thinking. And so what is critical thinking, let's say on a topic like this? Okay. Well, critical thinking is based on evidence. It went to court. They couldn't prove it. All these people say, I can prove it, we can prove it. They can prove it. It was nonsense. Trump made it up. He was starting to talk about being cheated 6 months before he lost because he probably knew he was going to lose. That's what happens when emotion takes over. You've got 40% of the country that believes this. It's okay. Let's not talk about opinions. Let's talk about metrics. Let's talk about data. Let's talk about proof. Let's talk about court cases. Let's talk about evidence. That's what critical thinking is based on. It's not opinion-based thinking. Emotion, on the other hand, is opinion-based thinking. So it's not about politics. It's not about anything else but critical thinking versus emotional thinking. Now, if they would have come out and said, well, all the courts or a lot of the courts have proven that there were irregularities and Donald Trump won the election. Okay, that's critical thinking then, because you're basing it on data. You're basing it on research. You're basing it on evidence. Emotional thinking doesn't need anything but emotion. It's like alcohol. Just keep drinking. You'll get dumber with every drink. I'm not against drinking. I like to drink, but not that much, but enough, that I do it. But I also know with every drink, I'm getting stupid. I'm getting dumber, And so you have to know that. And so it's with anything. COVID-19, here's another example of critical thinking or the lack thereof. We're in a spot now where obviously the scientists are trying to figure things out. But now I flew the other day to Chicago and you still have to have the mask on the airplane. But if you're eating food or drinking a Coke or water or whatever on an airplane, well, then you don't have to wear your mask. Okay, it's circulated air. So how is it that half the planes taking off the mask when they eat and they're keeping it on when they don't eat? How is that helping? I mean, guys, this is not critical thinking at all. I didn't complain. I put the mask on because, there's no real point in it. But there's no critical thinking going on here. People are wearing masks outside walking around. Well, that doesn't protect anybody. There's no one around them. So there's a lot of delusional thinking. And delusional thinking is really, delusional thinking and emotional thinking are the opposites of critical thinking. So you got to ask yourself, where are you in this? How often do you use critical thinking? Now let's go to your performance field. If you're an athlete, you're a coach, you're a business person, you're an entrepreneur, you're a professional, you're a doctor, you're an attorney. How often do you use critical thinking in your life, in your practice, in your business, in your sport versus emotional thinking or delusional thinking? And I will tell you the truth. In no uncertain terms, most people I've worked with in companies, salespeople, use emotional thinking. They're not basing their decisions based on evidence. They're basing their decisions based on how they feel. And feelings are a terrible measure of performance and behavior and results. Terrible measure. I can get myself to feel anything. It's all emotion. It's all just a drug. It's a chemical in my brain. Easy to make up. But evidence is evidence. Proof is proof. Science is science. Research is research. Here's the point of this whole thing. I'm going to wrap up the show with this for today. Base your decisions on critical thinking. Base it on evidence, base it on statistics, base it on results. Don't base it on how you feel or a group of other people feel. I don't care if it's the President of the United States or the Academy Award-winning actor or the biggest politician in Washington who thinks COVID is all made up and it's all a conspiracy. It doesn't matter who it is. Base your decisions on critical thinking based on evidence. Look at the science. Look at the evidence. Look at the proof. And stop making decisions based on how you feel and make them based on reality, critical thinking, and backed up by data. And your results will go through the roof. That's how, when people say, how do you turn around 9 years of successful turnarounds without missing one in corporate America? We did 9 years, so the tune of $1.3 billion in increased sales. Okay, how do you do that? A lot of it was getting them into critical thinking. Get people to face objective reality, the way things are, as opposed to the way that you wish they were, and get them to think critically. Take action and execute based on data, not based on feelings. And all of a sudden, you start to see things in a different light, and you start to build on a solid foundation as opposed to a fantasy. And that makes all the difference in the world. So we'll talk more about this when we go through the next episodes, but I want you to think about this idea of critical thinking, and we'll talk more about it in an upcoming episode. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.